Maura Murray. When Officer Cecil Smith pulled up on Route 112 that February night in New Hampshire, the car was still there. The airbags had deployed, the doors were locked, and the headlights were on. A box of red wine sat unopened inside, and the driver's gloves were still on the seat. But the driver was gone, and she had been gone for 7 minutes. The woman who owned the car was Maura Murray, 21 years old, a nursing student at UMass Amherst, and a former West Point cadet. She was one of 5 children in her family, and by every account, a person people paid attention to. But something had been unraveling in the weeks before she vanished. She had broken down at her campus security job after a phone call about her sister, and days earlier, she had crashed her father's car into a guardrail on a New England highway. On the morning of February 9th, 2004, Maura emailed her professors and told them a family member had died. It was not true. She withdrew money from an ATM, packed clothes into her black Saturn, and pointed the car north without telling a single person where she was going. Her family did not know she was leaving Massachusetts. Her boyfriend, an Army officer stationed in Oklahoma, did not know either. The only trace of her that day was a phone call she made at 4:37 in the afternoon to her own voicemail. Just before 7:30 that night, a resident named Faith Westman looked out her window in Haverhill, New Hampshire, and saw a black Saturn in a snowbank on Route 112. A bus driver named Butch Atwood pulled up beside the car a few minutes later and asked the young woman inside if she needed help. Maura told him she had already called LA, which was not true, since there was no cell signal in that stretch of road. She asked Atwood not to call the police. He drove home and called them anyway. At 7:42, Officer Cecil Smith arrived 3 or 4 minutes after that. And in the small window between Butch Atwood's taillights disappearing down the road and the patrol car pulling up behind her Saturn, Maura Murray vanished. Search teams combed the woods for weeks. Cadaver dogs, helicopters, volunteers on foot. Investigators traced her steps, mapped every farmhouse, checked every driveway within walking distance. Nothing turned up. Not a shoe, not a strand of hair, not a footprint in the snow. She had left the accident report forms sitting on the passenger seat and walked out into a February night in a temperature that was already below freezing. 3 theories have followed the case for the last 2 decades. The first is that she wandered into the woods, disoriented, and died of hypothermia in terrain that never gave her body back. The second is that a passing motorist offered her a ride, either kindly or with intent, and that whoever picked her up is responsible for what happened next. The third is that Maura had planned to disappear all along, that the wrong turn onto Route 112 was not a wrong turn at all, and that she is somewhere out there, living a life nobody else knows about. How does a young woman evaporate on a rural stretch of American highway with a state trooper minutes away? That question has never been formally answered. The case remains open with the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit. In July of 2022, Attorney General John Formella and State Police Colonel Nathan Noyes announced a fresh ground search off Route 112 in the towns of Landaff and Easton, roughly 5 miles from where Maura's car was found. Officials were careful to say the search was not the result of new information, only part of an ongoing investigative process. Nothing was recovered. In 2024, the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, authorities released an age progression photo of what Maura might look like today and said they were applying new forensic technology to the evidence they had. Her sister Julie launched a podcast that same year, keeping the family's search alive 1 episode at a time. As of 2026, no arrest has been made, no remains have been found, and no theory has become fact. The tip line for the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit is 603-223-3648. Maura Murray disappeared in a place with witnesses, with police response, with a car full of evidence, and with a paper trail leading right up to the moment she stepped out of the driver's seat. 2 years later, and 800 miles west, a very different kind of disappearance would happen in the middle of a college town, on a night with hundreds of witnesses and dozens of security cameras. And it would be even harder to explain. Brian Schaffer. The security camera watched the escalator all night. Every person who walked into the Ugly Tuna Saloona in Columbus, Ohio, that night rode up the same escalator. And when the bar closed a few hours later, the same camera watched every one of them leave. Except one. Brian Schaffer was 27 years old, a second-year medical student at Ohio State University. He had lost his mother, Renee, only 3 weeks earlier, to a rare form of cancer. He was 3 days away from flying to Miami with his girlfriend Alexis Wagoner, where he planned to propose. By every account, he was a settled, focused young man, doing what tens of thousands of college students did on the last night before spring break. That evening had started calmly. Brian had dinner with his father. Around 11, he met up with his close friend William Clint Florence, and the two of them worked their way through a handful of bars on High Street. After 1 in the morning, they walked into the Ugly Tuna Saloona in the South Campus Gateway complex, joined by a friend of Florence's named Meredith Reed. Security cameras filmed all 3 of them entering the building. They filmed the trio riding the escalator up to the bar. And at 1:55 in the morning, they filmed Brian standing outside the entrance, talking with 2 young women named Brighton Zotko and Amber Ruich. When the conversation ended, Brian turned around and walked back toward the bar. He never appears on any camera again. The Ugly Tuna closed at 2:30. Clint Florence and Meredith Reed left. Cameras captured them walking out. Cameras captured the last of the staff, shutting the place down and going home. But no camera, anywhere in the complex, captured Brian Schaffer leaving. On the morning of April 3rd, he was supposed to board a plane to Miami. He never checked in. Alexis called. His father called. Nobody could find him. His phone was silent. His bank cards and credit cards showed no activity. His apartment looked exactly the way he had left it before going out. He was reported missing that day, and the Columbus police pulled the surveillance footage. The footage created a puzzle that has never been solved. There was one possibility investigators looked at hard. The back of the Gateway complex was under construction during that stretch of 2006. That section of the building was not covered by cameras, and it is possible Brian slipped out that way. It is also possible he never did. Detective John Hurst, who has spent years on the case, does not believe Brian walked away from his life on purpose. His working view is that Brian is likely deceased, and that foul play is the most probable explanation. Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost, when the case was reopened for re-examination, said much the same thing. Brian did not seem like a person who was going to skip out on his own life. But the case never produced a suspect. Central Ohio Crime Stoppers pushed a reward that grew, eventually, to $100,000. Tips came in for years. Every lead was chased. None of them led to Brian. What does it mean when the person you love simply is not in any of the frames anymore? The case took a strange legal turn in 2024. 2 brothers named Matthew and Brian Osowski filed a defamation lawsuit in Franklin County Common Pleas Court against an anonymous Reddit user going by the name Queen Bee. The user had accused the brothers, in public posts, of being predatory killers responsible for Brian Schaffer's disappearance and other missing persons cases in the area. The Osowski brothers, who have never been charged with any crime, sought at least $25,000 in damages, along with retractions and a court injunction. The suit is a reminder of how internet speculation about unsolved disappearances can spiral. And it stands as one of the more unusual pieces of legal activity attached to the Schaffer investigation. As of 2026, the Brian Schaffer case remains open and unsolved. The 20th anniversary of his disappearance passed in March. His father continues to advocate for the case. Alexis Wagoner has moved on with her life, but has spoken publicly over the years about the man who was going to propose to her that spring. The Ugly Tuna Saloona itself closed long ago. The South Campus Gateway is still there, and the escalator Brian rode up on the last night anyone saw him is still there too. A closed building in a busy college town is one kind of impossible disappearance. A crowded international airport with hundreds of travelers and constant surveillance is another kind entirely. And on a July morning in 2014, in a coastal Bulgarian city, a young German tourist would give the world one of the most watched examples of the second kind ever recorded. Lars Mittank. The clip is roughly 30 seconds long. A young man in a white t-shirt walks out of a Bulgarian airport terminal, looks over his shoulder, breaks into a sprint, and vaults a fence at the edge of the parking lot. He runs across an open field toward a tree line and disappears. That video has been viewed more than 16 million times on YouTube. The young man in it has been missing for 11 years. His name is Lars Joachim Mittank. He was 28 years old, from the town of Itzehoe in northern Germany, and the trip to Bulgaria was the first time he had ever left his own country. He had gone with 5 friends to Golden Sands, a beach resort near the city of Varna, for the kind of package holiday that ends with sunburn and stories. What actually happened during that week ended with Lars alone in a cheap hotel, convinced he was being hunted. The trip started normally. Lars and his friends spent their days at the beach and their nights at the resort's bars. On what should have been their last evening, around the 5th of July, 2014, Lars got into an argument with a group of other German tourists. Reports have long tied the argument to football, since Lars was a devoted Werder Bremen fan. He wandered away from his friends and did not come back that night. The next morning, he told them that 4 men had beaten him and injured his ear. A local doctor examined him and diagnosed a middle ear infection. The doctor told Lars he should not fly home. His friends had already booked their return flights and could not stay. So they left, and Lars checked into the Hotel Color, a cheaper property in Varna, to wait for his ear to heal. That was when he began to unravel. He called his mother Sandra in Germany and told her that people were trying to rob him. Then he told her they were trying to kill him. He asked her to block his bank cards. He said 4 men were following him. Security cameras inside the Hotel Color recorded him behaving erratically in the lobby, pacing, checking corners, watching the door. His friends had seen no signs of any of this during the trip. He had no documented history of mental illness. Whatever was happening to him had happened in the span of a few days. On the morning of July 8th, Lars went to Varna Airport to fly home. Because of the ear diagnosis, he first visited the airport doctor's office. It was inside that clinic that the moment on the tape happened. A uniformed construction worker walked past. Lars, startled, dropped his bag on the floor and ran. He tore through the terminal, out the door, across the parking lot, and over the fence at the edge of the property. He crossed a field, entered a stretch of woods, and was never seen again. He left behind his luggage. He left behind his passport. He left behind every physical trace of the life he had come there with. Investigators from the German Federal Criminal Police and Bulgarian authorities worked through Interpol. The prevailing theories fall into 3 categories. The first is medical. A serious middle ear condition can affect balance and cognition, and some have speculated that the infection, possibly combined with alcohol or medication, triggered acute paranoia. The second is that Lars was telling the truth, that someone genuinely was after him, and that he ran because running was the only option he thought he had left. The third is that Lars, in a moment of psychological rupture, chose to walk away from his life and start a new one somewhere in rural Bulgaria. None of the three has ever been confirmed. What do you do when the last thing your child says to you is that people are coming to kill him? Sandra Mittank has spent more than a decade trying to answer that question. She has printed thousands of flyers. She has traveled between Germany and Bulgaria more times than she can count. She has followed leads that came in from strangers who thought they saw her son on a train, in a village, at a rest stop. In 2019, a German trucker reported picking up a hitchhiker between Dresden and the town of Schildau in Brandenburg, who looked like an older version of Lars. The lead was chased. It did not turn into an identification. Sandra continues to believe her son is alive. As of 2026, Lars Mittank has been missing for more than 11 years. His face remains one of the most recognizable in the German missing persons registry, largely because of the airport footage that keeps circulating. Every year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, the video finds a new audience. Every year, new tips come in. None of them have brought Lars home. The Mittank case is a disappearance the world watched happen in real time, frame by frame, and still cannot explain. 4 years earlier, and half a world away, another young man had disappeared while his father listened to him breathe. The whole thing was captured, from the crash to the final word, on a 47-minute phone call. Brandon Swanson. For 47 minutes, Brian Swanson listened to his son walk. He heard footsteps on gravel. He heard his son breathe. He heard Brandon describe the road, guess at his direction, wonder aloud if the lights in the distance were the town where his parents were waiting. And then Brandon exclaimed a single word of surprise, and the phone went dead. Brian shouted his son's name into the receiver for another 20 minutes. There was no answer, and there has never been one. Brandon Victor Swanson was 19 years old. He was a freshman at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby, studying wind turbine technology because he liked the idea of building things that generated power. He was legally blind in his left eye and wore glasses. On the night he vanished, he was driving home from end-of-semester parties in southwestern Minnesota. Sometime after midnight, going into May 14, 2008, Brandon's car went off a gravel road and into a ditch. He was not hurt. He climbed out and called his parents. His father, Brian, and mother, Annette, got up, got dressed, and drove out toward the town of Lind, where Brandon believed he was. When they reached the area he described, they could not find him. They flashed their headlights. They called his name. He could not see them, and they could not see him. Brandon was actually about 25 miles east, near the town of Taunton, in a completely different part of the county. He decided to start walking. He told his father he could see lights in the distance and thought he could reach them. He kept his father on the phone as he walked. For most of an hour, the two of them talked the way parents and their college-age kids talk in the small hours of the morning. Brandon described what he was passing. Brian tried to help him orient. Every few minutes, one of them would try to figure out where Brandon actually was. Then, without warning, Brandon exclaimed a curse and the line cut out. Brian tried to call back. Nothing. He tried again and again through the rest of the night. His son's phone had gone silent. The next day, Brandon's car was found. It was 25 miles from where he had told his parents he was. His glasses were still on the driver's seat. Cell records confirmed how far off his estimate had been. Whatever direction he had been walking toward it in near total darkness, over unfamiliar farmland, without the corrective lenses he depended on. The Lyon County Sheriff's Department launched a search that would eventually involve ground teams, all-terrain vehicles, horseback riders, and aircraft. Tracking dogs picked up Brandon's scent and followed it. The trail led them down to the bank of the Yellow Medicine River, across the water, and up onto another gravel road on the opposite side. And there, in the middle of that second road, the scent stopped. No footprints continued in any direction. No belongings were dropped. No body was found. The trail simply ended. Investigators kept looking for years. In 2021, a severe drought lowered the water level of the Yellow Medicine River enough that searchers went back in with fresh eyes, hoping the receding water would reveal something. Nothing was found. There has never been any evidence of foul play. Brian Swanson has always maintained that his son did not sound intoxicated during the long phone call. He sounded, his father has said, like a college kid trying to find his way home in the dark. Where does a person go when a scent trail crosses a river and ends on a road? The case did produce one lasting change. In 2009, the Minnesota legislature passed a statute known as Brandon's Law. Before it, police in Minnesota often waited a set number of hours before treating a missing adult report as urgent. Under Brandon's Law, officers must begin an immediate investigation when a person is reported missing under circumstances that suggest danger, regardless of the person's age. The law is now cited in cases across the state, and other states have modeled similar policies after it. It exists because Brian and Annette Swanson refused to let their son's disappearance become procedural, and because the initial response to Brandon's call could have been faster than it was. As of 2026, Brandon Swanson is still missing. The Lyon County Sheriff's Department still keeps the case active. Tips continue to come in from time to time, most of them from people who remember the story or who have driven that stretch of gravel road and wondered. His parents still live in Minnesota. The tip line for the Sheriff's Department is 507-537-7666. Brandon Swanson disappeared with his father listening on the phone, on open farmland, with every second of his final hour recorded in one form or another. The next case is the inverse of that. A man who had spent 20 years prosecuting crimes in a small Pennsylvania county walked away from his car on a Friday afternoon in April of 2005. And every clue he left behind pointed in a different direction. Ray Griggsar. The laptop was found first. Fishermen pulled it out of the Susquehanna River in the summer of 2005, downstream from a small bridge. It belonged to a man who had been missing for 3 months. The hard drive was gone. A few weeks later, someone found the hard drive itself, sitting on the riverbank a distance away from where the laptop had been recovered. The two components had been dumped separately, which meant that whoever put them in the water had wanted to make sure that if one was ever found, the other might not be. Ray Frank Griggsar was 59 years old and had served for 20 years as the district attorney of Center County, Pennsylvania. He lived in Bellefonte with his girlfriend Patty Fornicola. He had announced that he would retire at the end of that year. He had an adopted daughter, Lara, and a career prosecuting cases in a college town that took its legal system seriously. On the afternoon of April 15, 2005, Griggsar took a half-day off work. Around 11:30 in the morning, he told Patty he was going to drive east on Route 192 in the direction of Lewisburg, and that he would be back later. He did not come back. The next day, his red 2004 Mini Cooper was found parked in a gravel lot near a large antiques mall called the Street of Shops in Lewisburg, roughly 45 to 55 miles from home. His county-issued cell phone was inside the car, powered off. His keys were missing. His wallet was missing. His personal laptop was missing. Investigators noticed two things about the car. There were cigarette ashes on the seat, and the interior smelled of smoke, even though Griecar was known to dislike smoking. And when witnesses in Lewisburg were canvassed, several came forward with sightings from that afternoon. One reported seeing Griecar walking through the antiques mall with a tall, dark-haired woman in her late 30s or early 40s. Another said they had seen a man matching a construction worker's description, leaning into the passenger side of a Mini Cooper. Police called the woman, citing the first credible lead in the case. But neither the woman nor the man leaning into the car has ever been identified. In late July, the fisherman found the laptop. In October, the hard drive turned up. Federal investigators, including the FBI, the Secret Service, and a private data recovery firm called Kroll OnTrack, worked on the hardware. Nothing usable was pulled off the drive. Later, a search of the shared home computer that Griecar and Patty had used showed a series of queries about how to wreck a hard drive, how to fry a hard drive, and how water damage affects a notebook computer. Investigators have always been careful to note that they cannot say for certain whether Griecar himself entered those queries, since he was not the only person who used the machine. The searches were disclosed publicly in 2009, and they cut against, rather than for, the theory of foul play. There is one background detail that has followed the case for years. In 1998, Griecar, as district attorney, declined to prosecute Penn State football coach Jerry Sandusky on a complaint that later became known as Victim 6, citing insufficient evidence at the time. Sandusky was convicted more than a decade later in a scandal that became public only after Griecar had disappeared. Investigators have consistently stated there is no evidence connecting Griecar's disappearance to the Sandusky case. The timing does not support a link, but the coincidence has kept the theory alive in public conversation. How does a district attorney vanish with his laptop broken, his hard drive dumped, and no one ever answering for it? Police have three working theories. The first is suicide. It is the leading theory among investigators. Griecar's brother Roy had taken his own life in a river in 1996, and witnesses in the days before Ray's disappearance described him as unusually withdrawn. The second is voluntary disappearance, that he walked away from his life and started over. The third, championed most publicly by Montour County District Attorney Robert Buhner, Jr., is foul play tied to one of the many prosecutions Griecar had run over his career. On July 25, 2011, Center County President Judge David Grine declared Ray Griecar legally dead. The petition had been filed on June 30th of that year by his daughter Lara, represented by attorney Amos Goodall. There has never been any activity on Griecar's phone, email, bank accounts, or credit cards since the day he disappeared. As of 2026, the case is still active with the Pennsylvania State Police, which took over the investigation from local authorities in 2014. The Troop G office in Hollidaysburg carries the file, and a $5,000 reward is offered through Pennsylvania Crime Stoppers. The 21st anniversary of his disappearance passed this past April. The tip line for the state police in Hollidaysburg is 814-696-6100. Not subscribed yet? Now's the time. And if audio's more your thing, find us on Spotify too. You can click the link in our bio. Bryce Laspisa. On the last night his mother spoke to him, Bryce Laspisa told her he was tired and needed to pull off the freeway to rest. He said he had found a residential area to park in. That was the last conversation. A few hours later, his SUV was found overturned down an embankment near a California lake. His phone was inside. His wallet was inside. Bryce was not. Bryce David Laspisa was 19 years old, an only child, and a student at Sierra College in Rocklin, California. His parents, Michael and Karen, lived in Laguna Niguel, several hundred miles to the south. He had grown up outdoors, easygoing, and close with his family. In the days leading up to his disappearance in late August of 2013, something in his life was beginning to shift. On August 28th, Bryce drove north to Chico to break up with his girlfriend Kim Sly. When he was done, he began the roughly 500-mile drive south toward his parents' house. He called his mother along the way and told her he had a lot to talk about when he got home. That call would come to matter more than anyone realized at the time. The next day, August 29th, Bryce ran out of gas in Buttonwillow, a small town along Interstate 5. A delivery driver from Castro Tire and Gas named Christian brought him 3 gallons of fuel. And then, instead of continuing south, Bryce sat parked. For roughly 13 hours, he barely moved. Location data indicated that he covered less than 10 miles in the span of 9 hours. Around 9 that night, police checked on him. He told the officers he was fine. He allowed them to search his car. There was nothing that gave them cause to detain him. At 2:08 in the morning on August 30th, Bryce called his mother, Karen. He told her he was tired. He said he had pulled off the freeway to rest in what he described as a residential area. Karen kept him on the phone, worried, and told him to stay put until she could reach him. That was the last time she heard his voice. Between 4:20 and 5:15 that morning, a passing motorist spotted his 2003 Toyota Highlander overturned down an embankment along Interstate 5 near Castaic Lake, roughly 90 miles south of where he had told his mother he was resting. The rear window was broken out. Inside the SUV, investigators found his phone, his laptop, his wallet. The ignition was off. There was a small amount of blood on the windshield. But the injury, whatever it had been, was not the kind of injury investigators believed would have kept him from walking. Bryce had climbed out of the vehicle through the rear window and left everything behind. Tracking dogs picked up his scent and followed it to a nearby truck stop. And then, like Brandon Swanson's trail before it, the scent ended. Los Angeles County Sheriff's investigators worked the case. In 2015, the Laspisa family funded a sonar search of Castaic Lake, on the theory that Bryce might have wandered into the water in the dark. Nothing was found. There has never been any physical evidence of foul play. His parents have always believed he suffered a head injury or a mental break in the hours before the crash and wandered off into terrain that never gave him back. How does a young man climb out of a wrecked car, walk away from everything he owns, and never appear on a single camera again? That question has never been answered. The Bryce Laspisa case is still classified as missing. NBC's Dateline profiled him again in 2025, drawing renewed public attention to a case that had gone relatively quiet in the years before. His parents still maintain a website and social media accounts dedicated to finding him. As of 2026, Bryce would be 32 years old. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department tip line is 323-890-5500. The Los Angeles Crime Stoppers line is 1-800-222-8477. Bryce Laspisa was alone on a dark stretch of freeway when he vanished. There were no witnesses to his final hours, no cameras trained on the embankment, No one to see where he walked from the truck stop. The case that follows is the opposite kind of setting. It takes place in the middle of a college town on a summer night, tracked from bar to alley to apartment lobby on one surveillance camera after another, and it still ends with a young woman disappearing at 4:30 in the morning. Lauren Spearer. In the last hour anyone saw her. Lauren Spearer walked out of an apartment barefoot, without her phone, without her purse, and without her shoes. She was 20 years old, 5 feet tall, and had type 1 diabetes and a heart condition that made every hour without help potentially dangerous. She was last seen at approximately 4:30 in the morning, walking in the direction of the corner of 11th Street and College Avenue in Bloomington, Indiana. She has not been confirmed seen since. Lauren Spearer was 20 years old, from the town of Greenburgh in Scarsdale, New York, and a sophomore at Indiana University Bloomington studying fashion merchandising. She was small, just under 5 feet tall, and lived with type 1 diabetes and a heart condition. Both conditions made every hour without medical care a dangerous one. On the night of June 2nd, 2011, she was out with friends near the start of the summer term. Around 1:46 in the morning of June 3rd, Lauren entered Kilroy's sports bar. She stayed there with friends for the next 40 minutes or so. At 2:27, she left with a friend named Corey Rossman. Surveillance cameras in a nearby alley showed the two of them walking together. In one frame, Lauren appeared to be stumbling. In another, Rossman was carrying her. Along that route, her keys and her purse were later found dropped in the alley. They reached her apartment building, Smallwood Plaza. Once inside, Rossman was punched in an altercation with someone he crossed paths with in the lobby. He has said he does not remember anything after that. Lauren's roommate, Michael Beth, then took her to a neighbor's apartment, that of a man named Jason Rosenbaum, to sleep it off. According to Rosenbaum's account, at some point that morning, Lauren woke up and insisted on leaving. She left without her shoes. She left without her phone. She walked out barefoot into the pre-dawn Indiana summer. Rosenbaum has said he last saw her at approximately 4:30 in the morning, walking in the direction of the intersection of 11th Street and College Avenue. Not a single camera anywhere in Bloomington ever captured her again. She never made it home. She never made it anywhere anyone has ever been able to identify. The Bloomington Police Department launched a full investigation within hours of her family reporting her missing. Volunteers combed fields, dumpsters, and wooded areas around the town. Divers searched local bodies of water. Persons of interest, including Rossman, Rosenbaum, and Beth, were interviewed extensively. All three denied any wrongdoing. No one has ever been charged. The department has consistently emphasized that the Lauren Spearer case is not a cold case, and that it remains an active and priority investigation. Theories have hardened into 3 main possibilities. The first is abduction, that someone driving through downtown Bloomington that morning saw a barefoot, disoriented young woman and took advantage of the situation. The second, raised at various points by her own parents, is that Lauren died accidentally from a combination of alcohol and other substances, and that one or more people hid her body to avoid legal consequences. The third is that she suffered a medical emergency related to her diabetes or her heart condition and collapsed somewhere no one has thought to look. How does a young woman walk down a college town street at 4:30 in the morning and vanish into a place with sidewalks, streetlights, and open businesses? That absence of an answer pushed her family into court. On June 26, 2013, Lauren's parents, Robert and Charlene Spearer, filed a civil negligence suit in United States District Court against Rossman, Rosenbaum, and Beth, arguing the 3 men had breached a duty of care to their daughter in her final hours. In December of that year, Judge Tanya Walton Pratt dismissed the claim against Michael Beth. In 2014, the same court dismissed the suits against Rossman and Rosenbaum, ruling that the family had failed to show that the men had caused Lauren's disappearance. The judge wrote that without evidence of causation, no jury could reasonably reach a verdict. The Spearers appealed. The dismissal stood. All three men have consistently denied responsibility. As of 2026, Lauren Spearer has been missing for nearly 15 years. The 15th anniversary of her disappearance falls this June. Her family founded a nonprofit organization called the Lauren's Legacy Fund. Her parents still speak publicly about the case. Bloomington police still refer to it as an active investigation. Lauren Spearer disappeared in the presence of witnesses and cameras, and none of it produced an answer. The next case moves out of the city and into the desert. It involves a viral YouTube comment, the solo hiker who wrote it, and a cave in the mountains of southern Nevada that may or may not exist. Kenny Veach. In June of 2014, an experienced desert hiker in Nevada posted a comment on a YouTube video about Area 51. In it, he described a cave in the Sheep Mountains whose entrance was shaped like a perfect capital M. He said that when he tried to enter it, his whole body began to vibrate. He said the closer he got, the worse the vibration became. 5 months later, he set out to try to find that cave again, and he never came back. Kenneth Lee Veach was in his mid-40s, a lifelong resident of Clark County, Nevada, and an experienced solo desert hiker. He posted his hikes on a YouTube channel under the name Snakebit MG. He had recently left a service technician job at a coffee company to try his hand at inventing. He was comfortable, more comfortable than most, being alone in the Mojave for days at a time. The comment that changed everything was posted in June of 2014 on a YouTube video titled Son of an Area 51 Technician. Kenny described discovering a cave in the desert whose entrance formed a perfect M shape. He wrote that he always entered every cave he found, but as he began to step into this one, his body started to vibrate. The closer he got, the worse it became. He wrote that he became scared and left as quickly as he could. The comment went viral in a way YouTube comments rarely do. Thousands of users flooded the thread. Many of them dared Kenny to return. In October of 2014, he did. He uploaded a video called M Cave Hike, in which he carried a 9mm pistol and hiked back into the sheep range to try to relocate the cave. He could not find it. That video became one of the most watched hiking videos of its era, largely because of the mystery that had already grown up around the M-shaped entrance. On November 10th of that same year, Kenny set out again. He told his girlfriend Sherian Pilgrim that he was going on an overnight solo trip back into the desert. He did not return. Pilgrim reported him missing. Red Rock Search and Rescue, a volunteer organization based out of the Las Vegas area, mobilized more than 30 searchers into the Sheep Mountains. They combed the harsh terrain by ground and by air. On November 22nd, 12 days after Kenny had set out, searchers found his cell phone. It was lying on the ground near the entrance to an abandoned vertical mine shaft, the kind of open pit that dots the old mining country of southern Nevada. The location was, by all accounts, the same location Kenny had filmed part of his October M Cave video. Searchers lowered a camera down into the shaft. Then they lowered a person. Nothing was ever found inside. Only Kenny's vehicle, parked at the trailhead, and his phone at the mouth of the shaft were ever recovered. What does it mean when the last physical trace of a man is his phone, sitting at the mouth of a hole no one can see the bottom of? Investigators from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department worked alongside the search and rescue teams. Kenny has never been officially declared dead, but he is universally presumed to be. Theories have split into three general camps. The first is that he fell into or intentionally entered the mine shaft. Depth, terrain, and animal activity could easily account for the absence of a body at the bottom, and searchers have said the depth of some Nevada shafts makes any recovery difficult. The second is suicide. A woman claiming to be his girlfriend told reporters in the aftermath that Kenny had been struggling emotionally in the weeks before he set out. The third is that he died of exposure or misadventure in the remote terrain, which remains one of the most punishing wilderness environments in the United States. The M-shaped cave itself has never been found or verified by any other hiker. As of 2026, Kenny Veach is still missing. He remains one of the most discussed real-world disappearances on the internet, largely because of the specificity of that final comment about the cave. His YouTube videos are still online. The M-Cave clip continues to draw viewers who go looking for the entrance themselves. None of them have found it. None of them have found Kenny either. The Kenny Veach case turns on a story a man told about himself, in his own words, in a public YouTube comment. The case that follows turns on a single moment that a working television crew watched happen and still cannot explain. It took place in the middle of the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest in Idaho, on a filming day for a Discovery Channel series. Terrence Woods, Jr. On the afternoon of October 5th, 2018, a documentary television production assistant named Terrence Woods, Jr. told a local helper on his crew that he needed to use the bathroom. He dropped his radio. Then, according to the associate producer standing near him, he took off running down a steep cliff into the Idaho wilderness, faster than the producer had ever seen anyone run. The crew chased him. They came back with their clothes torn and bloodied. They did not come back with Terrence. Terrence Schemmel Woods, Jr. was 26 years old, a graduate of the University of Maryland with a double master's degree earned in London. He was working as a production assistant on the first season of Discovery's Gold Rush, Dave Turin's Lost Mine, produced by the London-based Raw TV. He had worked previously on shows including The Voice UK. On the Idaho shoot, he was the only black member of the 12-person crew. His father dropped him off at Reagan National Airport on September 30th of that year. Terrence checked in with his family from Missoula, Montana, and reached the crew's Idaho hotel on October 4th. Around midnight that night, he had what would turn out to be his last phone call with his father. In the days before, he had texted his family that he was cutting the shoot short. Instead of returning home in mid-November as scheduled, he would fly home on October 10th. His last Instagram post was a photograph of forest at dusk, captioned only with the word Idaho. On October 5th, the crew was filming at the Penman Mines, near the ghost town of Oro Grande, deep in the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest. According to the account given to police, Terrence approached a local helper, said he needed the bathroom, and stepped away from the group. He dropped his production radio on the ground. Associate producer Simon G., one of the last people to see him, told investigators that Terrence then broke into a run, moving down a nearly vertical slope into the forest faster than G had ever seen a person move. Members of the crew scrambled down after him. They eventually returned to the trail with their clothes torn and streaked with blood from the descent. Terrence was not with them. The incident was reported to the Idaho County Sheriff's Office at 6:41 that evening. 11 crew members went back to the motel. One did not. A subsequent 911 log referred to what someone at the scene called a mental breakdown, though no context was provided for that description. The Idaho County Sheriff's Office, under then-Sheriff Doug Giddings, launched a search operation involving ground teams, boats on the surrounding rivers, and helicopter overflights of the Nez Perce Clearwater. It continued for roughly 6 days and was called off around October 11th. Sheriff Giddings said publicly that his department had not ruled out that something bad had happened, but that they had found no direct evidence of foul play. Terrence's father, Terrence Woods Sr., has always believed foul play. His theory, which he has repeated in interviews and to national outlets, is that his son had witnessed or overheard something on set that he did not want to be part of. He has referenced alleged on-set tensions with associate producer Simon G. and the racial dynamics of being the only black member of a small production team in a remote area. Raw TV has firmly and repeatedly denied any wrongdoing on the part of the production or any of its staff. The company has said the police investigation produced no evidence against it, and that Terrence was a valued and well-liked member of the team. How does a documentary production assistant, in his mid-20s, in the middle of a workday, run into a forest and never come out? That question has not been answered. The Terrence Woods Jr. case remains open, classified as missing, with the Idaho County Sheriff's Office. His story was featured in the Dateline. Missing in America, episode Into Thin Air, reported by Josh Mankiewicz, which brought national attention to a case that had largely faded from mainstream coverage. His family continues to advocate for a fuller federal investigation. As of 2026, no physical trace of Terrence Woods Jr. has ever been recovered. No remains, no clothing, no belongings. The tip line for the Idaho County Sheriff's Office is 208-983-1100. The Terrence Woods case is a disappearance in a place that can swallow a body without ever giving it up. Terrain so dense and steep that a person could rest a mile from a road and never be found. The last case takes place in open water. It begins on a cruise ship approaching a Caribbean island at dawn, and it is the only case in this list that has real forward motion right now. In the last year, new evidence has come in, and the federal investigators who let the file grow cold have quietly reopened it. Amy Lynn Bradley. Around 6 in the morning on March 24th, 1998, Ron Bradley walked out onto the balcony of his family's cruise ship cabin and found his daughter Amy gone. She had been asleep in a lounge chair on that same balcony less than half an hour earlier. The balcony door was slightly ajar. Her shoes were still in the room. Her shirt was still in the room. The ship was approaching Curacao. Amy has not been confirmed seen since. Amy Lynn Bradley was 23 years old, from Chesterfield County, Virginia. She was a recent graduate of Longwood University, where she had played on a basketball scholarship and earned a degree in physical education. She was a strong swimmer, a trained lifeguard, and had distinctive tattoos on her lower back and right ankle. She was scheduled to start a computer consulting job the week after her family's cruise. The Bradleys, Ron and Eva, along with their adult children Amy and Brad, boarded Royal Caribbean's Rhapsody of the Seas in San Juan, Puerto Rico, on March 21st, 1998. The itinerary was straightforward. Aruba first, then Curacao. On the night of March 23rd, Amy and Brad spent the evening in the ship's disco. Amy danced for part of the night with a bassist in the ship's house band, a Grenadian musician named Alistair Douglas, who went by the nickname Yellow. Around 3:35 in the morning, Amy and Brad returned to their family's cabin. They sat out on the balcony together for a while, watching the water. Brad eventually went to bed. Around 5:30, Ron Bradley walked out onto the balcony and saw Amy asleep in a lounge chair. About half an hour later, when he checked again, she was gone. Only the ajar door, her shoes, and her shirt were left behind. The ship was approaching the port of Curaçao. The Bradleys begged the crew to halt disembarkation and to make a full ship-wide announcement. The crew declined. Around 7:50, they made only a discreet page asking Amy to come to the purser's desk. By the time a real search began, thousands of passengers had already left the ship. The FBI, the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard, and the Bradley family searched the ship and the island. Nothing was found. Authorities have long doubted the overboard theory. The ship was close to shore, Amy was a strong swimmer, and no body ever washed up. What followed were the sightings. In August of 1998, a Canadian tourist named David Carmichael reported seeing an English-speaking woman with 2 male companions in Curaçao, and said her tattoos matched Amy's. In January of 1999, a United States Navy officer reported meeting a woman in a Curaçao brothel who identified herself as Amy Bradley and asked him for help. In 2005, the Bradley family received a photograph pulled from an escort website that they believed showed Amy. Sightings persisted for roughly 9 years across Curaçao, Barbados, and Aruba. Amy's parents came to believe, and continue to believe, that their daughter was abducted from the ship and trafficked. What do you do when the last verified sighting of your daughter is a lounge chair at dawn, and every possible sighting after that comes from strangers who cannot prove what they saw? In 1999, the Bradleys filed suit against Royal Caribbean in Miami. The claims included negligence, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a wrongful death claim that would have required Amy to be declared legally dead. The suits were ultimately dismissed after the court found that Amy's parents had, in the court's finding, perpetrated a fraud on the court by not disclosing contacts they had with witnesses whose accounts contradicted their claims. A Miami appellate court affirmed the dismissal. Royal Caribbean has stated throughout that its personnel acted appropriately and responsibly at all times. That legal history is a detail that has not always made it into the more recent coverage of the case. That coverage has been substantial. On July 16, 2025, Netflix premiered a 3-part documentary series called Amy Bradley is Missing. It spent 4 weeks in the platform's global top 10. It drove hundreds of new tips to law enforcement. Of those, 3 were described by a source close to the production as very significant. In October of 2025, the series director Ari Mark stated publicly that the FBI had reopened the case and assigned a new agent, that investigators had interviewed 2 persons of interest with alleged ties to human trafficking, and that one source had raised the possibility that Amy had given birth to a child at some point after her disappearance. Amy's brother Brad Bradley confirmed that new leads were being followed, but cautioned that the child claim had not been substantiated and had, at that point, been ruled out. As of 2026, the Amy Lynn Bradley case is officially unsolved. Her family, including Ron, Iva, and Brad, continues to search. Alistair Douglas, the bassist Amy danced with on her last night on the ship, has consistently denied any involvement in her disappearance. He has never been charged with any crime. If Amy is alive today, she would be 51 or 52 years old. She would have missed 28 birthdays with her family. Every one of these cases is still open, and everyone is still waiting on the piece of information that would bring it home. Thanks for watching. Click here to see our next video.